In a small town where everyone knew everyone's business, Miss Lillian did something that made the whole community whisper behind her back. Every single evening, without fail, she would prepare an extra plate of her best food and set it aside for a homeless man who never spoke a word. The townspeople called her foolish. They said she was throwing away good money on someone who would never amount to anything. But what they didn't know was that this simple act of kindness was about to change everything in ways no one could have ever imagined. Before we dive into this incredible story, I want to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below and let me know what city or country you're tuning in from. I love connecting with viewers from all around the world, so don't be shy. Hit that comment section and let me know where you are right now. Miss Lillian's diner sat on the corner of Maple and 3rd Street, a place where the paint was chipping and the neon sign flickered on cold nights. It wasn't much to look at from the outside, but inside, the smell of fresh coffee and homemade pie made it feel like home to anyone who walked through those doors. Lillian Rodriguez had been running this diner for over 15 years. She was a woman in her late 50s with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun and hands that told the story of decades spent cooking for others. Her smile was genuine, her coffee was strong, and her heart was bigger than the small town she called home. The diner served the usual crowd during the day: construction workers grabbing breakfast before their shifts, office workers on lunch breaks, and families celebrating small victories with a slice of Lillian's famous apple pie. But it was what happened after closing time that set tongues wagging throughout the community. Every evening, around 7:30, after the last customer had left and Lillian had cleaned the grill, she would prepare one final plate. It was always the special of the day, sometimes meatloaf with mashed potatoes, other times her signature chicken and dumplings, or a hearty beef stew that could warm you from the inside out. She'd wrap it carefully in aluminum foil, add a small container of whatever dessert was left over, and place it on the windowsill by the back door. The plate was for Joseph. Nobody knew Joseph's last name. Nobody knew where he came from or how long he'd been living on the streets of their small town. He was a man who appeared to be in his 60s, with weathered skin and clothes that had seen better days. His gray hair was always neatly combed despite his circumstances, and there was something in his eyes, intelligence, a depth, that suggested he hadn't always lived this way. Joseph never spoke much to anyone. He would nod politely when people passed him on the street, but he kept to himself. Most of the townspeople either ignored him completely or viewed him with suspicion. Some even complained to the mayor about having a homeless person in their respectable neighborhood. But not Miss Lillian. She had noticed Joseph about a year after she started leaving food out. At first, she hadn't known who was taking the plates. She just knew that every morning, the plate would be gone, cleaned and neatly stacked by her back door with a small folded napkin tucked underneath. It was a mystery that intrigued her more than it bothered her. One evening, while closing up later than usual, she happened to look out the back window and saw him. A tall, thin man carefully taking the plate, examining it as if it were a precious gift. The way he held it, with such reverence and gratitude, touched something deep in Lillian's heart. From that night forward, she made it her mission to prepare the best possible meal she could for Joseph. If she was making fried chicken for the next day's lunch special, Joseph got the first piece. If she was testing a new recipe for her chocolate cake, Joseph got the first slice. She began to think of that evening plate not as leftovers, but as cooking for a dear friend. The townspeople didn't understand. "Lillian, you're enabling him," said Mrs. Henderson, who ran the flower shop next door. "If you keep feeding him, he'll never get motivated to find work or improve his situation." "You're running a business, not a charity," added Tom Mitchell, the hardware store owner. "That food costs money. You could be serving paying customers instead." Even some of her regular customers began to comment. "Miss Lillian, I heard you're feeding that homeless man every night. Don't you think that's a bit much? What if he brings others around?" But Lillian would just smile and pour another cup of coffee. "Everyone deserves to eat," she would say simply. "And everyone deserves to be treated with dignity." What the townspeople didn't see were the small gestures that Joseph made in return. On mornings after particularly harsh weather, Lillian would find that someone had swept the area around her back door clean of snow or leaves. When her dumpster had been knocked over by raccoons, she'd arrive to find everything cleaned up and the trash neatly bagged. Small acts of gratitude that spoke louder than words ever could. This routine continued for over a decade. Through harsh winters when Joseph would disappear for days at a time, only to return looking more weathered than before. Through summers when the heat made it difficult for him to find cool places to rest. Through holidays when Lillian would prepare special meals, a full Thanksgiving dinner complete with turkey and stuffing, Christmas ham with all the trimmings. Joseph was part of her routine, part of her life, though they rarely spoke beyond a polite good evening when their paths crossed on the street. Then, one day, Joseph simply wasn't there. At first, Lillian wasn't worried. He had disappeared before, sometimes for a week or two at a time. She continued preparing his plate, hoping he would return. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The plate sat untouched night after night. Some of the townspeople were relieved. Finally, they said, maybe he moved on to bother someone else. But Lillian found herself genuinely worried. Had something happened to him? Was he sick? Had he found somewhere else to go? She asked around town, but nobody had seen him. The police said they'd keep an eye out, but there wasn't much they could do for a missing homeless person with no family contacts. Lillian felt a genuine sense of loss, as if she'd lost a dear friend. 6 months passed. Lillian continued her routine, but something felt missing. The evening plate sat in her refrigerator, and she found herself looking out the back window hopefully every night. Then came that rainy Tuesday afternoon in October. Lillian was wiping down tables after the lunch rush when she heard car doors slamming outside. Looking up, she was surprised to see a gleaming black luxury sedan parked directly in front of her diner. The rain was coming down steadily, and 2 figures emerged from the car, a man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase, and another man in an equally expensive overcoat. The bell above the door chimed as they entered, and Lillian looked up from her cleaning to greet the new customers. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. Terrible weather we're having. Can I get you some coffee to warm up?" The man with the briefcase stepped forward. He was younger, maybe in his 40s, with a kind of polished appearance that suggested he worked in law or finance. "Miss Rodriguez? Miss Lillian Rodriguez?" "That's me," Lillian replied, setting down her cleaning cloth. Something about the formal way he addressed her made her stomach flutter with nervousness. "My name is David Harrison. I'm an attorney with Harrison, Blackwood and Associates. I'd like to introduce you to my client, Mr. Joseph Whitmore." Lillian's eyes moved to the second man, and her heart nearly stopped. Standing there in a perfectly tailored navy suit, with his hair professionally styled and his face clean-shaven, was Joseph. But this wasn't the Joseph she knew. This was a man who looked like he belonged in boardrooms and country clubs. "Joseph," she whispered, her hand moving to her heart. Joseph stepped forward, and for the first time in over a decade, he spoke to her in full sentences. His voice was cultured, educated, the voice of someone who had been raised with privilege. "Hello, Miss Lillian. I'm sorry I disappeared without saying goodbye. I had some family matters to attend to." Lillian sank into the nearest chair, her legs suddenly feeling weak. "I don't understand. Joseph, what's happening? Who are you?" The attorney cleared his throat. "Miss Rodriguez, may we sit down? What I have to tell you might come as quite a shock." Lillian nodded, gesturing to the booth nearest the window. The 3 of them sat down, with Joseph and the attorney on one side and Lillian on the other, still staring at Joseph in amazement. "Miss Rodriguez," the attorney began, opening his briefcase and pulling out several official-looking documents, "my client is Joseph Whitmore III, heir to the Whitmore textile fortune. His family has been in business for over a century, with holdings in real estate, manufacturing, and investments worth approximately $47 million. Lillian's mouth fell open. $47 million? Joseph leaned forward, his eyes gentle but serious. "Miss Lillian, I need to explain. 12 years ago, I had a falling out with my family. It was over their business practices, their treatment of workers, their priorities. I was disgusted by the wealth and privilege I'd been born into, especially when I saw how it corrupted the people around me. I walked away from everything, the money, the properties, the lifestyle. I wanted to see what life was really like for people who weren't born with silver spoons in their mouths." "You chose to be homeless?" Lillian asked, still trying to process this information. "I chose to live without the cushion of wealth," Joseph corrected. "I wanted to understand what real kindness looked like. I wanted to see if anyone would show compassion to someone who had nothing to offer in return. The attorney continued, Mr. Whitmore's father passed away 6 months ago. Despite their estrangement, the family fortune was left to Joseph as the only heir. He's been working with our firm to settle the estate. Joseph reached across the table and took Lillian's hands in his. Miss Lillian, for over 10 years, you were the only person who treated me with genuine kindness. You never asked questions, never judged me, never expected anything in return. You fed me when I was hungry, and more importantly, you treated me like a human being when the rest of the world looked right through me. Tears began to form in Lillian's eyes. Joseph, you don't need to thank me. I just did what anyone should do. But that's exactly the point, Joseph said. You did what anyone should do, but you were the only one who actually did it. While others complained about my presence in their town, you welcomed me with open arms and an open heart. The attorney cleared his throat again. Miss Rodriguez, Mr. Whitmore has asked me to prepare a new will. He wants to leave his entire estate to you. The words hit Lillian like a physical blow. What? No. No, I can't accept that. Joseph, that's too much. I don't want your money. Miss Lillian, Joseph said gently, this isn't about the money. This is about recognizing the kind of person you are. In all my years of wealth and privilege, I never met anyone with a heart as pure as yours. I have no children, no wife, no family members who deserve this inheritance. But you deserve to be rewarded for the kindness you've shown. Lillian was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I didn't do it for a reward. I did it because it was right. I know, Joseph said, his own eyes misting over. That's exactly why you deserve this. The attorney placed the documents on the table. The estate includes the family mansion, several commercial properties, investment accounts, and a trust fund that will provide you with a substantial monthly income for the rest of your life. You'll never have to worry about money again. Lillian looked around her small diner, the cracked vinyl booths, the old cash register, the faded photographs on the walls. This place had been her life for 15 years. What about the diner? She asked. Joseph smiled. That's entirely up to you. You could renovate it, expand it, turn it into the finest restaurant in the state. Or you could keep it exactly as it is. The choice is yours. The news spread through the small town like wildfire. The homeless man that everyone had dismissed, the one they'd complained about and ignored, had been worth millions of dollars all along. And he'd left everything to the woman who had shown him kindness without expecting anything in return. Some people were envious. Others were ashamed of how they'd treated Joseph over the years. But most were amazed by the incredible turn of events. Miss Lillian kept the diner open. She used some of her newfound wealth to renovate it, creating a warm, welcoming space that served the best food in 3 counties. But more importantly, she established a foundation that provided meals and support services for homeless individuals throughout the region. And every evening, she still prepared an extra plate. Not for Joseph. He had returned to his rightful place in society and visited the diner regularly as a dear friend. But for the next person who might need a reminder that they mattered, that someone cared, that kindness still existed in the world. The lesson was clear to everyone who heard the story. You never know who you're helping when you choose to show kindness. The person you dismiss might be the one who changes your life forever. This incredible story reminds us that kindness is never wasted, and you never know how your simple acts of compassion might come back to bless you in ways you never imagined. If this story touched your heart like it touched mine, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And remember to drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from all around the world. Subscribe for more amazing stories like this one, and remember, in a world where you can be anything, choose to be kind. You never know whose life you might change, or how they might change yours in return.